The Tenejapa Tzeltals occupy the western highlands of the tribal area. They were previously plagued by poverty and alcoholism. Receiving the gospel from the Oshchuk Tzeltals, they rapidly evangelized their people and began building beautiful churches. The town of Tenejapa is located in a narrow valley surrounded by towering hills. In this photograph is one of their churches at the edge of the hillside. It is the Canaan congregation who colorfully painted the front of their church. The elderly woman is the first believer of the area, with one of her 3 sons and his wife. They survived strong opposition and now live in town and own a cement block business and a big truck. The road eastward out of Tenejapa climbs a steep mountain of solid limestone rock. The ancient foot trail has been replaced by a narrow road. Near the top of the ridge, it is a long way down to the bottom. Just over the crest of the mountain is a new chapel named Philippi. Built on the hillside by a dozen families, they and their guests have gathered to dedicate their new building. A musical group from another congregation provides the special music. Before entering the church, there is the reading of Scripture, prayer, and the cutting of the ribbon. Then everyone eagerly enters the door, with the first ones heading for the front rows. The view from this church is spectacular, showing the Oshchuk and Kankuk areas and the beginning of the lowland area to the east. Continuing down the side of the hill, the road gives this view of the mother church of the area named Samaria. We have gathered to witness the ordination of the first Tenehapan minister, Alonso Luna. Pastor Francisco Gomez of Corralito is reading the questions for the candidate from the liturgy. Alonso then preaches his ordination sermon, with Francisco and the other members of the Presbyterial Ordination Committee listening. One of the choral groups is from Kankuk, the dialect area to the northeast. Many in the congregation capture the music on their tape recorders. The congregation is seated on the ground of the basketball court. It is an outdoor celebration since the church would not hold the crowd. The women are sitting on the left side. The tall pole fence is there to keep the basketballs from going down the hill. The men are seated on the right side and on the hillside above the basketball court. Notice how much they had to dig into the hillside to create the basketball court. At the end of the service, Pastor Alonso pronounces the benediction for the first time. Following the service, there is pop and cookies for everyone. This shows how the entire basketball court was covered with pine needles so that no one would get dirty. This is Sebastian, one of the elders of the congregation, with his attractive family. Not far away from Samaria Church on the same hillside is the second mother church named Messiah. The elders of the church are standing, with the committee from the Tzeltal Presbytery squatting in the front row. A crowd gathers for the dedication service for their new building. A prayer is offered before they cut the ribbon, open the door, and enter. It is wall-to-wall people inside, with lots of color in their clothing and in their decorations. Their choir is one of the best. In the middle of the back row, the shortest man is Alonso Jimenez, who later became their pastor. Here he is about 20 years later with his family. We became attached to Alonso, especially since he was on the translation team for the revision of the Highland Bible. As the church grew, so did the size of their consistory. Here they are posing with their wives on their first-class basketball court. Farther down the hillside is the Jerusalem congregation. This is what it looked like when I first approached it. Later, they painted it with bright colors. The inside was also brightly painted. Pastor Alonso Luna is on the left, with Paul Meyerink and the local church leaders. That day, one of the deacons gave the final financial report for the construction of the church building. Their choir sang some hymns in four-part harmony. This family singing group also contributed some special music. Years later, I was saddened to hear that they had torn down their beautiful stone-walled church and were building a larger one. Attending the dedication service, we were amazed at the size and beauty of the new building. A young man of the congregation was the architect. The front of the church was artistically done. The congregation honored the 9 bricklayers who had led in the construction of the church. The church was filled by the congregation and visitors. There was pop and cookies for everyone following the service. Our last visit to Jerusalem Church was to say farewell before our retirement. At the road above the church, this trio honored us with a song that they had created about us as their missionaries. Then they led us down the hill to the church, singing on the way. Helen was accompanied by the pastor's wife and members of the choir. This congregation was under the care of Pastor Alonso Jimenez. When they completed the plastering of the walls of the church, one of the men painted flowering trees on the walls. Here he proudly poses in front of one of his trees, and they insisted that we do likewise. Here is the view of the congregation from the platform. Helen is giving words of greeting and thanks. Farther down the hillside is the original Tenaha congregation of Sahal Ten, which means Red Rock. We were invited to their Christmas drama. Here the shepherd choir is singing after visiting Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus in the background. The 3 wise men have arrived, and Herod is asking his scribe where the Messiah was predicted to be born. Further south on this same hillside is the Star of Bethlehem Church. They carved a basketball court below the church building. Notice the steep hillside cornfields rising above the church. As they say, you can get hurt falling out of your cornfield. Later they painted their church and added an attractive front. The inside was also colorfully painted and decorated. Being the Star of Bethlehem Church, they crowned their facade with a star, and they decorated it with the Presbyterian Church emblem. The women waited patiently for the doors to open, and then they filled the church to overflowing. They have a good choir, taught by one of our Bible school students, who later became their pastor. A family musical group also participated. Some years later, they built a larger sanctuary. On the dedication day, the clouds were down to the ground. The front of the church did not look much larger than the previous one. But the inside was huge, holding over 1,000 people. Traveling north from these churches, there are other large, attractive Tenaha churches. This one is hidden in a tree-covered area. The trees are shade trees for coffee plants. The church is called Puerta de Salvation, Door of Salvation, and it is one of Pastor Alonso Luna's congregations. Prior to the service, we met with the pastor, elders, and as special guests, the president and vice president of Tenejapa and their 3 police protectors. Helen offered the opening prayer for the service. After the service, we gathered outside for a bottle of pop. I am seated next to the town president and Pastor Alonso Luna. The vice president of Tenejapa was a member of the congregation. Helen is wearing the garb that he and his wife gave to her before the service. The president, vice president, and the 3 policemen pose for a photo. The pastor's wife and the wives of the leaders of the congregation join Helen in another photo. We will make one more trip, this time to the sacred hills of Tenejapa. At the base of this mountain, called Matsap, is a church called Philippi. A truck filled with visitors is on its way there. These men welcome us and take us to the kitchen for a breakfast. From the road, we get this view of the church and the educational building. These people are gathered at the door. The leaders of the church are waiting to welcome us. The Tzeltal Bible School students provide some of the special music. After the church, it is time for photos of Pastor Alonso and the local consistory. Outside the church, they insist that I join them and that another photo be taken. The gospel continued to spread throughout the Tenejapa area until there were 30 congregations under Pastor Alonso Luna's care. Here he has gathered all his elders, deacons, and preachers for a weekend conference.